Good morning. Welcome to the UU Church of Lancaster. My name's Heather Guerin Rice. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm serving as your worship associate today. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to this progressive spiritual community where we come together to nourish the spirit, collect in love, and act for justice. At UUCL, as we like to refer to ourselves, love is our only doctrine, and service and justice are our most sacred prayers. So we pray striving to live lives in words and deeds that affirm that Black lives matter. And our doctrine of love has moved us to affirm for decades that love is divine and love is what makes a family. This Unitarian Universalist congregation is a place where we come to learn more about being human. We're not here because we've figured out life's questions or because we think we've got it right. We welcome all of you to our service, especially those of you who are searching for a spiritual home. Many of us were once too seeking for something larger than ourselves to which we could belong, a sense of rootedness to hold us as we create meaning together. We do that here, though not perfectly. In this congregation, we strive not for perfection, but for authenticity and connection. So whether it's your first time here with us or your 100th, we hope that you will find questions here that stretch you, people to befriend you, and progressive spiritual values that challenge you to join us in loving boldly, living justly, and welcoming radically. I now invite us to enter into sacred space as Reverend Israel lights our chalice, beloved symbol of our Unitarian Universalist movement, with these words from Andrea Hawkins Camper. May we see all as it is, and may it all be as we see it. May we be the ones to make it as it should be, for if not us, who? If not now, when? This is answering the cry of justice with the work of peace. This is redeeming the pain of history with the grace of wisdom. This is the work we are called to do, and this is the call we answer now, to be the barrier and the bridge, to be the living embodiment of our principles, to be about the work of building the beloved community, to be a people of intention and a people of conscience.
Yes, thank you, Heather. Good morning, everyone. I am Reverend Israel. I use he, him for pronouns, and it's my pleasure to welcome all of you here too. And I'm the minister of this congregation too, if you didn't know that. Let's see who we have here with us this morning. It's really lovely to look out and see so many faces, to see your faces, and I always invite you, while you join us, if you feel comfortable, to turn on your camera so that we can see each other, so that you can see who you are here with this morning, so that we can feel each other's presence, know that we are in this space together, not separate, but together. And I also encourage you to wave hello to each other too. And somewhere out there this morning, I know that we have the folks from Willow Valley joining together for the first time. We have a small group joining together in person in one of the auditoriums in Willow Valley. So we're really glad that we were able to do that and have those folks. Oh, we can see them. I can see them. Hi. We are here on this morning, Sunday, and it is the weekend of the holiday that is commemorating the life and legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And so today we're going to reflect on his life, on his legacy, and on the legacy of enduring love that his memory has left for us, on the legacy of enduring love that his life drew upon, and the ways that has inspired all of us to live lives of enduring love. And we are here in this moment to do all that in the spirit of what we call worship, which I say almost every week. I think that this time together is a time to turn our attention to the things that matter most, to the things that are most important in life. And this week, I want to emphasize that we are not just turning our attention so we can think about these things, but we are turning our attention to them so we can both think about them, feel them, know them with our whole bodies, and so that we can also be inspired to go out into the world and interact with each other in our community, in our country, in our world, to make it a more just and loving place. That is why we focus our attention on these things, not just so we can think about them, but so we can become them. Today, we focus on the ideals of beloved community, on the ideals of enduring love, on the message from Dr. King when he said that we are all a part of an inescapable network of mutuality, tied up in a single garment of destiny. What a powerful, powerful image, my friends, of Unitarian Universalist theology, of our belief that we are all deeply connected, interconnected, and that it matters incredibly how we treat each other and how we move about in this world. So I ask us this morning to reflect on some things. What does this reality of interdependence ask us as individuals and as communities to do? And how can we care for each other knowing this truth? We are here to turn our attention on the things that matter, on the lives that matter. And so let our lives live that. And let us live our lives knowing that our lives begin to end on the day that we become silent about things that matter. So let us together show collective care. Let us rise up and let us find the strength that we need to make a statement, to speak up, so that we can go out and live our interdependence with the world. We open our service this morning with an African-American spiritual, "My Lord, What a Morning." This song reflects on a deep, deep history and theology of freedom, of liberation, of struggle, and of upending the world and seeing freedom and liberation and justice break out into it, of waiting for the day, but not just waiting for it, but calling into being the day when the stars of oppressive systems would fall down from the sky and rain down on the earth a new morning, a new era of peace and love and justice through our collective care and enduring love.
My Lord, what a morning. My Lord, what a morning.
On this morning, on some mornings, like many mornings, it can feel to us like the stars in our own skies are falling down, or perhaps like they are rising up and shining beautifully on us. Or perhaps we can look up to the sky, struggle to find meaning in the jumble of constellations that we see in front of our eyes. And we can feel overwhelmed by our own smallness in this vast, deep, and complex universe. We come together here to make sense of all that we encounter in this world, to make sense of our lives and make meaning in the jumble of constellations in this vast universe. So here we are together in this space, and if we are to allow ourselves to enter into it fully and to be perhaps transformed by it in some small way or big way, we must first feel that we are able to bring our whole and authentic selves to it. One way we do that is by sharing with each other the things that are on our hearts, the joys, sorrows, and complex truths that we are processing always, that we seek to make meaning of. We bring here to this space the things that break our hearts, the things that weigh them down, the things that give us roots, and the joys that also give us wings. So now is the time that I invite you, if you wish, if you have something on your heart, a joy, a sorrow, or a complex truth, that you feel that you must share with this community, that you feel that you need the support of this community to carry. Now is the time that I invite you to type that into our chat in 15 words or less, and we'll read it aloud for you. And as we do so, I'll drop a stone here into this, which symbolizes our well of community, where we are all held. And for all of the joys, sorrows, and complex truths, the ones that all of us carry every day, the ones that remain in the silent places in our hearts, the ones that are still in process, and the ones that words cannot and perhaps never will be able to fully express. For all of who we are, I add this stone to our well, which grows heavy, reminding me that our well must be wide and deep. Our community must be one of profound love and warmth to be able to carry and hold all of these things for all of us. We gaze upon our well filled with these stones, reminding us that out of our mountains of despair, we must each chisel for each other a stone of hope to cast into this deep well. Reminding us that in life, despite insurmountable odds, we must be there for each other. I ask you to join me in the spirit of mindfulness, meditation, presence, what some know as prayer. To turn our attention once again to what matters. Through all of the challenges and difficulties of life, we remember this morning the words of Dr. King when he said, "If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl." And I add to that, if you cannot crawl, then dream. And if you cannot dream, seek those out who will help you dream. Ask for help from others from loving community. Let them hold your hand and steady you as you begin to crawl, as you begin to walk. That life and love move you forward through the struggles and the challenges that we face. Let the love of others hold your hand as you move. But perhaps most importantly, let us hold each other's hand as we dream this path into existence. As we pave this path into existence, as we make a way out of no way in this impossibly complex life. And whatever you do, never stop, never give up struggling and dreaming. Let us know that there is always more love somewhere.
There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more hope somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more peace somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more joy somewhere. There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. Till I find it. There is more hope. There is more hopes. There is more joys. There is more joy. There is more love. There is more love somewhere.
Thank you for that beautiful music. And a good Martin Luther King Jr. Day and weekend to each of you. You know, growing up Unitarian Universalist, this day has always been an important part of the sacred liturgical calendar for me. And on sacred days, we tell sacred stories to remind us of where we are coming from and who we strive to be. And this story comes from one of the sources of wisdom, our 6 sources of Unitarian Universalism, the words and deeds of prophetic people. And a few of you may know it backwards and forwards, and a few might be hearing it for the first time. And yet when I went back to read this story, it's one of our Spirit Play stories we used to tell in person, I was really struck by how differently I'm hearing it, having lived through the time of COVID and racial justice protests that are really rocking the world. And I hope no matter how you relate to this story, that you can find something new in it today to inspire you in your own life's work for a better world. In 1954, a young man named Martin Luther King Jr. became the new minister at the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. He preached nonviolence as a way to change things that are violent and unfair. Dr. King's congregation was an all African-American congregation in the South of the U.S. during the time of segregation. Segregation was a system that used laws and violence to put down Black people by keeping them out of many spaces where white folks were, in order to keep powerful white leaders in power. Places like libraries, schools, places to eat, places where you can find opportunity. Many African Americans in Montgomery were fighting against segregation, in part by joining the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And then, on December 1st, 1955, something happened that changed Martin Luther King Jr.'s life and American history. You see, the way the bus system worked was that white people would sit in the front, Black people would sit in the back, and there was a place in the middle where Black people sat until a white person asked for the seat. And if they asked for the seat, that person had to move. Let me say that again, they had to move. I wonder, how does that make you feel? You know, Dr. King, when he was a little boy, he still remembered the feeling of humiliation and anger at the injustice of these moments like that, when somebody would ask him to get up and go somewhere else. Well, Rosa Parks, right here, she refused to give up her seat on a bus to a white person. Now, many of us know this story of Rosa Parks, a seamstress who was tired or fed up after a long day of work. What a lot of people don't know is that Rosa Parks was not just tired. She was a longtime activist, lover of her community, dedicated to the cause of social justice. She had gone to trainings in nonviolent protest, so she was prepared, she was ready for this moment. And more importantly, even than that, her community, people were ready to support her. This was not her first time refusing to give up her seat to a white person on a bus. It's just the first time that she was arrested. And in fact, other African American community members had also been arrested for refusing to go along with segregation. This time, leaders in the African American community decided the time was right to organize to support Rosa Parks and to make a push to demonstrate against this unfair system. This is Rosa Parks getting arrested. Well, leaders called a boycott against the bus community. Boycott, refusing to pay the company, refusing to pay to ride the bus when Black folks were not being treated equally. They decided to run that for one day, and a group of political activist women stayed up late to make thousands and thousands of flyers at the local university. I remember hearing a story that said that they were using the way to duplicate these, and they were using that resource of the local university, and they were hoping that they could get it done in time. This is a real copy of the flyer. Now, these organizers were hoping that half or more of the Black community of Montgomery would refuse to ride the buses for that one day. You've got to know that most Black people in Montgomery at the time needed those buses to get to work, because hardly anybody had cars. So Monday morning of the boycott, the organizers were standing at a bus stop, watching and really hoping that the boycott would be a success. They weren't sure. Could people do it? And then they saw empty bus after empty bus rolling by, some with just a few white passengers in them. And they were amazed. It turned out that almost all of the Black community of Montgomery participated in that boycott. That's 40,000 people. By the way, 60,000 people live in Lancaster City, to give you an idea of how many people participated in this. Some cities would find it hard to organize 40,000 people in 2 days, but a lot of people in the Black community of Montgomery were already used to talking about political issues and working for equality. And with such success, leaders met to discuss what to do next. And Dr. Martin Luther King, that young preacher who was new to living in Montgomery, was elected the president of the new group to keep the boycott going. And in fact, an elderly friend of the family says that part of the reason that he was elected was because he was new to Montgomery, and it was a very, very risky thing to be the public face of such a boycott. And they did keep it going. But it's hard to keep up a boycott like this. Thousands of people walked and walked and walked to work, to school, to home, to church. Empty buses kept rolling by. Some walked as far as 20 miles each day. 20 miles. Here's a group of folks walking. What does it look like they're feeling? Participating in their own liberation. Now I want you to guess. How long do you think that this lasted? Walking miles and miles everywhere. Guess how long this might have lasted. Here's a calendar. December 1955. Maybe a week? Can they keep it going a week? Maybe they kept it going a month. Through the winter snow, the slush, the sleet, kept going more. People gave each other rides to work. They organized carpools so that people wouldn't have to depend on the bus system. They kept their energy going with mass meetings in churches, even in the hot Alabama summer. They listened to Martin Luther King and other ministers give inspiring speeches. And they sang music to keep themselves walking, keep on going, to keep seeking out more love. Did they keep it going? All the way for over a year. They walked. And I don't know about you, but I look at this calendar a little bit differently than I did in January of 2020, which is, I think, the last time I told this Spirit Place story. You know, it was hard for the leaders too. Rosa Parks, she lost her job. People harassed her, people sent her death threats, but she kept going. Her experience, her activism in the NAACP had prepared her for this moment. And some people from the white community who wanted the boycott to end made bombs and attacked the homes of some of the leaders. Martin Luther King Jr.'s home was attacked one night, him and his family. But he and the others asked everyone to keep going, to not be afraid, and to not fight back with their guns, but to stand up for their rights using the power of protest, because they knew that that would be effective. Martin Luther King Jr. was also arrested during this boycott. There were lawyers from the Black community helping fight this unfair law while the people on the ground boycotted the buses. And finally, after months and months of walking, came the news that the U.S. Supreme Court had declared segregation on buses was against the Constitution, not allowed. So all across the U.S., not just in Montgomery, African Americans would no longer have to sit in the back of the bus or give up seats to anyone. This was part of the struggle for full opportunity, for dignity, for honoring of their inherent worth and dignity, and for the right to have a voice in their own communities. These are principles that are dear to us as Unitarian Universalists. And many people celebrated the victory that they had hard won. I wonder, how is it that they could keep going for so long? I wonder if there's any part of this story that surprises you. I wonder how this story relates to us, right here, right now, today.
Be that guide whom love sustains, rise above the daily strife. Lift on high the good you find. Help to heal the hurts of life. Be that helper nothing daunts. Doubt a friend or taunt a foe. Ever strive for liberty. Show the path that life should go. Be that builder trusting good. Bitter though the test may be. Through all ages they are right, though they build in agony. Be that teacher faith directs. Move beyond the old frontier. Though the fright and fear that faith be tomorrow's pioneer. Be tomorrow's pioneer.
The legacy of Dr. King. How does it live in us today? All of us. And what does it move us to do to make our world a better place today? It's tempting to make such an incredible person in history a saint, to put them up on a pedestal, make them mythological, make them something unattainable, make them something more than human. Dr. King, though an incredible person who inspired billions, was a human being who lived and struggled, a human being who met the challenges of his day, though imperfectly, like any of us. A human being who understood the struggle because he knew it deep in his bones from his own people, and who inspired compassionate action in others, who inspired compassionate action in white people to understand the struggle. And so when we look at his legacy today, many are tempted to think that we can tie it up in a neat bow, think that we can tie the civil rights era up in a neat bow as something that happened in the past. Instead, we look at his legacy, not just as his legacy, but as something that he was a part of, as you can see in some of those pictures that we were just looking at. That Martin Luther King was an incredible person, but he did not exist on his own. He stood, he was lifted up on the shoulders of all of those who came before him, of all of those with whom he struggled with in his time, and all of those who co-conspired and inspired with him. And we must know ourselves to be lifted up on those shoulders as well, to be part of a lineage of strugglers for justice. Dr. King said that we are not makers of history, but we are made by history. We must know that we are not alone today in this struggle that still continues, that still exists. The struggle for voting rights still continues. That we are part of generations. that the promised land that Dr. King and those whom he fought with, who he struggled with, the promised land that they were trying to achieve has not been achieved yet. We have not arrived there yet. To know that that arc of history, the famous quote that says that the arc of history bends towards justice, to know that that arc doesn't just happen on its own, it doesn't just bend on its own towards justice, that all of us in every generation must stand on each other's shoulders and reach up and grab it and bend it down and tear it down. Not just as an arc, but actually so the thing about that quote is it comes from a Unitarian minister named Theodore Parker, who said that the arc of history bends towards justice. But one of the times when Dr. King said it, he didn't just say the arc of history, he said that the history bends at the elbow of justice, meaning that it is not a neat, like beautiful rainbow arc that kind of bends perfectly through time, but that it is something that is pulled through struggle, by force, by love, that it doesn't just happen easily and nicely and neatly. That is one of the things I want us to know and understand today. Dr. King said that for some strange reason, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am who I ought to be. This is the way the universe is structured. This is our inherent worth and dignity of every person woven into the fabric of the universe. It is our understanding of our deep interdependence, of our shared mutuality for shared liberation that we must embrace. But it is not just neatly sewn or structured into the universe, this principle of interdependence. It is not innately structured in some passive way, but it is woven in by you, the interconnected web, who do your task, who take up the task of weaving the strands together lest they come unraveled by the powers that be. It is about weaving that web with love, of course, but it is not a love that is anemic and passive, like I said. Because Dr. King also said that power without love is reckless and abusive, but love without power is sentimental and anemic. We often seek to paint a picture of Dr. King that is sometimes sentimental and anemic, I think, when we put it in the past and detach ourselves from it and don't see ourselves as part of that ongoing struggle. When I think back to the Montgomery bus boycotts and I hear the story and I look at the pictures, I ask myself, where were the white people? Where were the white people walking 20 miles through snow and sleet and rain and heat to work, co-conspiring for liberation with their Black brothers and sisters and people? Where were the white people? And I ask us today, because we know that the struggle for liberation is not something that gives itself up on its own. I ask ourselves today, what are we willing, all of us, all of you, no matter the color of your skin or your background or your privilege or your upbringing, what are you willing to give up for the struggle? What discomforts are you willing to embrace in the service of love? Because the nonviolence that Dr. King talks about, the love that Dr. King talks about is, like I said, not a passive love. Nonviolence was all about emptying yourself into the world, about approaching those who would approach you with violence in an open and compassionate way so they can look back in that emptiness, so to speak, and see their own brutality reflected back. To not meet brutality with brutality is not just about like an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind kind of thing. It's about being able to hold that space of compassion so that someone who is coming at someone with violence can see just how absurd their own violence is. That's what it's truly about. It's not passive, and it takes great, great strength to be able to hold that, to be able to do that. It's a discomforting thing. It's a fierce love. It is a fierce love that one must have for one's own self and for the service of liberation to be able to do that. And so I think it is actually nonviolence in this sense that helps those who practice it to become attuned to just how terrible violence is, to help others become attuned to just how terrible oppression and violence are, so that they can perceive what is going on and so that they are moved to experience compassion and to change it. Ultimately, I think it's a hope to appeal to the compassion and the humanity in each other. But to expect oppressed people just to carry the burden to do the work on their own. Dr. King even said that when he talked about love, it doesn't mean that he's asking oppressed people to be affectionate towards their oppressors or even loving towards their oppressors. He even called that nonsense, that idea nonsense. And so the true, I think, lesson of Dr. King's enduring legacy is this call to interdependence. The call of each of us to see someone else's problems as our own, to see ourselves woven into the same fabric together. For all of us to feel and know ourselves as participants in this struggle. For white people to know that racism is not a Black problem, it's everyone's problem. That lack of voting rights in Georgia or Texas is not a Georgia or Texas problem, it's a Pennsylvania problem. It's an American problem. To know that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. To know that when we see ourselves as okay living in a country that tolerates these things, that we forget our interconnection for a bit, and that the soul of our country, of our nation, dies just a little bit each time. Dr. King said that America would never be free or saved from itself until the descendants of slaves were loosed completely from the shackles that they still wear. He said that in 1957, and it's still just as true today as it was then. Those shackles still exist in so many ways. And in many ways, they are worn by all because we are all part of a system. All part of a system that creates the links of those shackles. No matter whether you feel them more heavily on your wrists than others. We may have all come here on different ships, he says, but we're all in the same boat now. So if we are to save the soul of America through his legacy of enduring love, we know that we must do it together. That we must do it through the salvation of democracy. And that is what we are called to do on this Martin Luther King Day. To save the soul of our nation through the soul of democracy. And we are being asked this year to focus on protecting voting rights, to restore and protect the right to vote for all. This is an intrinsic part of our UU fifth principle, which is about democracy and about everyone having a voice. And if you don't quite see how democracy is a spiritual principle, I want you to just hear this quote, actually. So comes from Desmond Tutu, who died recently, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And he was asked in an interview with Krista Tippett, which is an NPR program called On Being. This was from about 10 or 15 years ago. He was asked in an interview what it was like the first time that he voted. And he didn't get to vote until he was 63 years old. And when he was asked what it was like to go and vote for the first time, he said, "How do you describe falling in love? How do you describe falling in love?" I mean, people asked then when we voted for the first time. It was an incredible experience. For you, as an American, going to the ballot box is probably a political act. But for us, it was a religious act. It was a spiritual experience because you walked into the polling place, one person, with all of the history of oppression and injustice and all of the baggage that we were carrying. And you walk and you make your mark and you put the ballot into the box and you emerge on the other side. And you are a different person. You are transfigured. Now you actually count in your own country. My friends, if we believe that we are all truly interconnected and that it matters, we must protect democracy in our own country. There's very little time to wait. I'm going to have some actions that I can suggest for you all in a few minutes, but I want to just leave you right now with a thought. Perhaps some of you know the story of Rip Van Winkle. And this is I actually got this reading another one of Dr. King's sermons, but he talks about the story of Rip Van Winkle, which you may have all have heard before, but it's about the man who goes up to the mountain and he falls asleep and he sleeps for 20 years. And he wakes up after 20 years. And that's probably what most people know about the story. But the thing that you have to remember from the story that I was reminded reading Dr. King's sermon was that Rip Van Winkle sleeps for 20 years. And before he goes up to the top of the mountain to sleep, he goes by a tavern, and on the tavern, there's a picture of King George III, who was the king of England before the American Revolutionary War. And when he comes down, the picture on the sign for the tavern is a picture of George Washington. And so he literally slept through the American Revolution, the American War for Independence. Many people today, many of us, all of us, find ourselves today living during a period of great social change. And as we live through that period, it can be tough, I think, to develop new attitudes or new ways of being in the world that help us to meet the world as it is and what it needs from us to be co-conspirators in this struggle for independence and interdependence and liberation. And when we fail to develop this strength together, or this knowledge, when we fail to meet the challenges of the world, it is like we are sleeping through a revolution. But unlike Rip Van Winkle, if we sleep through the revolution, we will not find ourselves woken up to being on the other side of a revolution of independence. We may find ourselves woken up on the other side of a revolution with outcomes that we may not like. So if you are going to do some sleeping, which we all need to restore ourselves sometimes, make some space for dreaming, make some space for the dream. And make some space for cultivating in yourself the strength that you need to go out and meet the challenges of the world. And let's let Dr. King's dream today be for us an alarm clock that wakes us up out of our sleep, that calls us to join together and to grab and to reach that moral arc of the universe and to put our hands on it and to pull it all the way down here to a justice, to a liberation grounded in the experience of those who demand it. So let us go out and do that.
Spirit of life, come unto me, sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion, blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the end, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
We now take an offering as an outward expression of our interdependence. You can support our work as you are able by texting the amount of donation to the number on the screen or through the Contribute tab on our website at uuclonline.org, or you can mail it to our brick and mortar building on West Chestnut Street. Our Share the Plate recipient this month is the Crispus Attucks Community Center, which strives to improve the quality of life for youth and families in Lancaster, providing services that promote community prosperity, physical and mental health, and by offering programs and cultural events which preserve the African American heritage. The offering will now be gratefully received.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to that life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. Cool, take it.
That concludes our service.